This is the second in a series on color. So many people have done so much with color, come up with theories and personalities and all kinds of ways that they use color to spark conversations, to wrap their world in certain ways. And so I thought, well, we could use color to spark our conversations about this journey through life and what is important to us and how color can inform us along the way. And so the reading that Jean shared was one of those that caught my eye, because this color blue is something different for each person. Several of you are wearing blue today. I mistakenly wore purple last week when I was talking about purple, so I thought I'd carry on with the theme and wear blue today. But I wondered if people could just call out what their favorite color of blue is, using a different name for it, or something that they like that is blue, if you can't come up with the actual name for it. Royal blue. Okay. I'm sorry? Aquamarine. Teal. Robin's egg. Navy. Navy. Sapphire. Indigo. Periwinkle. Powder blue. Baby blue. Sky blue. But what sky? I mean, there's that sky at twilight that seems to throb with this interesting blue color. Robin's egg. All these different kinds of blue for us to engage, to love, to despise, to color our homes with, to dress our children in. When I grew up, the middle of 3 girls, we often had to wear the same clothes, but theirs would be some other color, and mine was always blue. I don't know why, and it might not even be true. I just remember that I had a lot of blue stuff when I was a kid, and my sisters on either side got to bracket me with other more vibrant colors, I thought. But blue is the color that settles upon us as something that is normal, it's natural. Blue is a color that we think of often as we think of one of the regular colors, and it's considered one of the primary colors, though that's been a bit debunked. If you look at your printer, it's not exactly a blue, they call it something else now. But it's just a normative color in our lives. I wanted to share with you some of the stuff about blue personalities. In some of the color personality stuff. The idea of blue describes a certain kind of being, and I happen to live with one, very blue person. And so I'm going to read that personality style to you. It starts with, congratulations, you're a blue personality. The core motivation that drives you through life is intimacy, and many of you will recognize yourselves as I read these things, because you're blue as well, or if you're not completely blue, you have blue aspects to your personality. So this is coming from the color personality, and the idea is that it's about what motivates you to act in a certain way, not what your behavior is. So the color people, of course, think their color personality program is more effective and correct than any other personality program. So I'll just read you this very correct one. Blues need connection, the sharing of rich, deep emotions that bind people together. As a blue, you'll often sacrifice a great deal of time, effort, and/or personal convenience to develop and maintain meaningful relationships throughout your life. Some of you are probably resonating with that. The amount of time that it takes to care for, to nurture, to maintain relationships is significant in your lives, and then you may be a blue. If you're some for a season, some for a reason, and you move on, then chances of your being a blue are probably less. They seek opportunities to genuinely connect with other people. We have groups that meet in this community that are of people who genuinely want to connect and get to know one another more deeply. I would warrant that many of them are some shade of blue on this blue personality chart. Everything you do as a blue has to be quality-based, or you won't do it at all. Is that true? That's true. That's true. You're incredibly loyal to friends, employers, employees, and above all to your significant other. I was very relieved when I read that. But I didn't need to read it, because that's lived out in our relationship all the time. Blue turn-ons: being sincere and genuine, appreciating and understanding them, being thoughtful, expressing interest in personal details, and behaving appropriately and being well-mannered. I'm working on that last one. Blue turn-offs, being non-committal, becoming emotionally unavailable or dismissive, demanding spontaneity, promoting too much change, abandoning them, or being disloyal. This blue personality is one that loves to be with people, to engage, to connect with the other, to have a relationship with them, to have them saying significant things that reflect that they're not just being there, they're actually present to that person. We speak in our community about being in right relationship. We speak about this regularly, about being in right relationship with oneself, with others, and with the planet. And blues in this personality spectrum have the being in right relationship with others down pat, because their interest is in preserving and strengthening that relationship. And so they go at that in a very intentional, deliberate, and caring way. Build that relationship up. Once it's there, they'll work on it to maintain it in ways that some others may do less of. But I want to talk today not so much about the other in our right relationship with self, others, and the planet, but to talk about oneself. And to talk about that other realm of blue that we find ourselves sinking into periodically. And that's the realm of depression, or melancholia, or sadness, or sorrow. And depression can be episodic, or it can last for a very, very long time. And so the realities that affect any one person in relation to depression would be and could be very unique and very different from other people. It's important also to note that I am not licensed to practice medicine or even psychotherapy in the province of Ontario or anywhere else in the world. And so what I say is information that I've gleaned from listening to others speak and from reading and from researching things on the internet. I am not an expert on this, and I don't claim to be. But the reality of depression touches so many lives. It's become what some are calling an epidemic. That there are so many people who are currently being managed for depression that it will become the largest health issue by 2020, outranking heart disease and diabetes and all the other health issues. That depression will become the #1 major topic. It's a concern for us because it affects people in their relationships and at work. It affects their productivity. It affects who they are. And so we need to be attentive to the realities of depression and what is making it happen. I wanted to read to you from The Unquiet Mind, a memoir of moods and madness by Kay Redfield Jamison, which was published in 1997. In its severe forms, depression paralyzes all of the otherwise vital forces that make us human, leaving instead a bleak, despairing, desperate, and deadened state. Life is bloodless, pulseless, and yet present enough to allow a suffocating horror and pain. All bearings are lost, all things are dark and drained of feeling. The slippage into futility is first gradual, then utter. Thought, which is as pervasively affected by depression as mood, is morbid, confused, and stuporous. It's also vacillating, ruminative, indecisive, and self-castigating. The body is bone-weary. There is no will. Nothing is that is not an effort, and nothing at all seems worth it. Sleep is fragmented, elusive, or all-consuming. Like an unstable gas, an irritable exhaustion seeps into every crevice of thought and action. Now, in 1988, I think, there was a breakthrough in the treatment of depression. At least there was a pharmaceutical response to the treatment of depression that seemed to create a response to a biological understanding of how depression happens. And that could increase the serotonin levels in our brains, those chemicals that help us stay on top of things, that give us a sense of joy and delight in the world. and that these serotonin-based products could actually alleviate many of the symptoms of depression. And so in 1988, they became available, and their use continued to grow and grow and grow until now, in some places, in some high schools or universities, antidepressants, such as those serotonin-based ones, are more prevalent than birth control pills on campus. Some would say that that's a good thing, others would say that's a very bad thing. Our use of antidepressants to deal with depression, and particularly with mild and medium levels of depression, has become so widespread that when we fall into an experience of it, our physicians are very quick often to help treat those symptoms with one of these medications. In 2005, the number of people taking antidepressants in China was a fairly moderate amount. In 2008, 3 years later, once the pharmaceutical companies had begun making their drugs more widely available in China, the incidence of prescriptions being written and filled had increased by 700%. So the availability of the medication has become epidemic, perhaps, as much or more so than the actuality of depression. I listened to a 3-part piece on ideas on rethinking depression, where the producer had gone into great lengths to understand things about some of the drugs that are being used, some of the things that cause depression, and some of the things that people do in order to pull themselves out of depression. And I have here a whole bunch of stuff about different theories around what causes depression. There are theories around the rank theory of depression, that if you're in a position of status where you're recognized and loved, and you have a very strong sense of well-being, and that status is removed, say you end up moving to another city, you lose your job, you end up at university and you don't know anyone, that can lead to depression. Psychodynamic theories of depression related to some of your understanding of your relationship with your parents as a child and how you had to cope with some of the demands and expectations and behaviors of those adults when they were your lifeline to everything you needed to survive, and what that does to you as a child. Stress vulnerability theories, where you may have particular things that you're vulnerable to, and so incidences of stress can trigger depression. And then the cognitive theory of depression, that negative thought can be overwhelming, and that we get caught in these cycles of like a broken record of negative thought and can't find our way out, each of which, of course, calls for a different response. And then there are the biological understandings of depression around levels of serotonin, around the potential for brain chemistry and physiology to be different based on our upbringing and trauma we may have experienced as children, genetic inheritances, all those kinds of things that are biological, and so then can be responded to in different ways. So the theories of how to address depression vary widely as well. And that's where I'm going to put my notes down, because that was all I really needed to remember. Because what I wanted to talk about is that theory of love for oneself, of living in right relationship with oneself, and how we do that when we experience episodic or continual depression. One of the concerns that was raised in the program on CBC was that some of the medications that do boost serotonin may have a long-term effect of actually creating depression, because the mind, the brain, just as it tries to regulate your body temperature, also tries to regulate your serotonin levels. And so if your serotonin levels are boosted chemically, that your brain will work to push those serotonin levels down again. So if you go off that medication, you have a naturally created suppression of that level. I mean, I say naturally because it's your brain doing it, but it's in response to a chemical. And so what may have in the past be seen as an episode of depression where someone may become non-communicative, maybe catatonic for a period of time, they may have come out of it after that period of time. And there were very few incidences of very severe depression, that episodic depression may have actually righted itself with supports. One group online has done a self-selected, and so it is not an official or statistically representative survey of those people who have experienced depression and what it is that they use and what is effective for them in their recovery from depression. And in only one case did one of the medications go a little bit above the line. Most people had reflected on relationships with people who care for them, caring for a pet, walking, meditation, exercise, many of those things. And in the loss of those normal practices in depression, as one becomes depressed, it's like the brain is saying, as it does to a swollen or a twisted ankle, the brain sends all kinds of things to numb that ankle, to swell it up so it cannot move, so it can heal. Perhaps it may be that in our minds, in our relationships, in our lives, when there are those social or psychological places where we are in trouble, the brain shuts down other things so that we can focus on that. Shuts down our will to get out of bed, shuts down our libido, shuts down even sometimes our desire to eat. And we're left in this place where all we can do is lament about our lives, to run over those relationships that we have, to test them, to stretch them, to work away at them. I think we have to find ourselves in these conversations in a place where we can look to ourselves and find out what is the best for each one of us, to find out what it is that works for us, to work closely with those in a professional field that can offer us the support and the wisdom that will move us through episodes of depression. But are there other things that we can do, because we're related to this kind of a community, that we can explore in tandem with those other supports that may be provided? And I asked Scott for a copy of the words to the song that he just wrote, so that I could use them to reflect on this experience of the blues in our lives, and how these questions that come down to what would love do now may help to guide us through those difficult parts in our lives, as I say, supported by those other things that need to be in place as we move through them. Sorry, I do have to get the notes again. But the main question being, what would love do now? Scott broke down in this song around what call would justice make? Is there something in your life that is a situation of injustice, where you have been over and again seeking to be heard, to be understood, to right a wrong, to place yourself in a position of risk that others might be able to have an easier go of it? Is there an injustice in your life that has worn you down to the point that you're no longer able to care for yourself? It's not just about everything out there. That's the context I speak about all the time. The context is, where are you standing right now? And what are your realities, and how can you respond? That context is super important, because we can only respond out there when we care in here. And so if you give a hoot about that, you have to give way more than a hoot about this. So what call would justice make about you and caring for yourself, when we feel ourselves slipping from floating on top to slipping underneath? Is justice an issue? And how must you care for yourself in the face of it? How can we be kind to ourselves? As a mother, I learned at the hem of my mother that kindness to myself was always secondary. I was always supposed to give to other people. I was always supposed to be kind. I was always supposed to be offering them whatever they needed, particularly to my children. I would sacrifice anything for my children. We went down to see some of Isaac's artwork in an art show yesterday. We spent an hour and a quarter driving down there, 40 minutes with us, with him, and he said, I really want to spend some time with my friends now. See ya. Okay, absolutely good with me. And it was. But we learn to put ourselves second when it comes to kindness. How would you be kind to yourself when you're slipping beneath that surface? What is the kindest thing you can do for yourself? It might be go to bed and pull the covers over your head and stay there for 3 weeks. I don't know. It might be seek out a friend. It might be go for a walk. It might be stop doing some of the self-giving things that you do over and over again. What path would kindness take? I love this one. What would a little more wisdom see? Wisdom is not just a bunch of information and facts. Wisdom is being able to take those information and facts and settle them into the context of your life, and then be able to look at what that picture looks like and make choices based on that going forward. We often don't have the perspective of wisdom because we're operating from a self-preservationist mode, or we're dealing with 1,000 different stressors in our lives, and we don't have time to consider how what is known and offered to us out there fits into our lives. Often, and this happens in our relationship, Scott will say something that is particularly wise, and I don't even hear it. I can't make sense out of it. It doesn't translate into the story, the narrative that I'm telling me in my own brain. And so I don't hear a thing that he says. It's only when we stop and say, okay, where's the wisdom here? And we set aside our own preconceived understandings of ourselves and our own narratives that we tell over and over and over again, that we can hear another story come in to the telling. That's what wisdom might offer us. And what would courage set free? I truly believe that a lot of my experiences of episodic depression are about courage. They're about my stifling the things that I really needed to say. They're about my being honest in relationships that I have to be honest in, but those relationships will be at risk if I'm seriously honest. The courage that I need on a day-to-day basis, generally I can come up with. Lots of people think I'm one of the most courageous people they've ever met. But on a one-to-one personal relationship, I fail on that over and again. And over and again, when I feel myself slipping beneath that deep blue surface, it's because of a lack of courage. If I would take the moment and discern what needed to be courageously spoken into that space, even if I can't say it, just acknowledging it, perhaps writing it out, perhaps going someplace where no one can hear me and screaming it, would be therapeutic in a way. What would courage set free? What would compassion say? Again, similarly to kindness, how can we be compassionate to our own selves? How can we seek that compassionate response from others? When we are giving and giving and giving, we often forget to seek that response from others. And all of that, I think, might just save the day when we're experiencing episodic depression. Some of the studies that have shown that drugs don't work as well as they might remind us that we are human and we live in community. And that when we take care of exclusively ourselves, which is what a medical model must be, that we sometimes cut ourselves off from the deepest and truest and most therapeutic elements in our lives, those who love us and can care for us. We sometimes cut ourselves off from our deepest reflections, from those moments of despair into which we might fall, and that might offer us perspectives that can bring us to a place of truth. Frightening and worldview changing and relationship challenging as that place of truth might be. When we deal with our depression as something that is exclusively ours, and we disconnect ourselves from the interconnectedness of all life, I believe we've put ourselves in a position of fragility and risk. And so when we live in right relationship with ourselves, it is a relationship that connects us to others. in a very real, very beautiful, very meaningful way. And so, the one thing I offer you about this color blue is that blue must connect with you, and you must connect with others. We are all interconnected, and our personal depressions must be recognized as part of a whole, and that as part of that whole, we have much to offer, even and especially when we want to just go to bed and pull the covers over our head. I know that many of you in this space have been in that place, and that my words can only ever come to you from my own perspectives on this. The information on the Ideas program is rich and deep, and I would definitely encourage you to look for that, to seek it out and to listen to that program, all 3 parts of it if you can. I said to Scott when I finished listening to the last bit on things that people do for depression that I really want to go and spend 40 days in silence at a Loyola Ignatian retreat. Not sure where that really would help, but there are a lot of very interesting thoughts and comments. So take the blue away with you, weave it into community, and know that you are not alone. Thank you.